there a motion on the table?
Yeah, I motion to approve the minutes from last week.
All right, Brandon moves. Is there a second? Alex seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving last week's minutes? All those opposed? Any abstaining? With that, the motion passes. All right, I don't have any reports this evening. Do our advisors? I do not.
A couple. One, the subcommittee, I know Eric's not here, but just as a reminder, anyone who's interested in serving in that subcommittee with Eric, please, if you didn't after last week's meeting, if you can let Benet know after this week so we can get you on there. I'll touch on that one too. Yeah. The other part, we are not meeting next week, just as a reminder. Our next meeting is on the 28th, and it'll be our last meeting of the quarter. So with that, and just so you all know in advance, I think we have a couple requests that are on the docket for that meeting. We will most likely look to vote on them and hear them at the same time. So that way the committee's not hearing them on the 28th and not voting on them until January to give you guys the chance. But just that way you know in advance we'll be hearing and voting on those ones unless there's any extenuating circumstances. And then also, so you're aware, but also so it's in the minutes, just a reminder the annual reports are due December 1st from all of our base funding areas. So those will be coming in, and then we'll get a chance to look over them before getting those posted for you all to view when we come back in our quarter. So the annual reports from all of our base funding areas.
Great.
Do we do anything with those annual reports?
We will look at them, but then groups, we have a third of them who come in starting in the winter quarter who will come forward and do kind of a program review and look at their annual reports at that time. Yeah.
And are they posted on the website?
They are all posted on the website. Yeah. Will be. They will be. They're not yet.
All right. That's it.
Yep. That's all I got.
Awesome. So this is the first call for the public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move into old business supplemental funding requests. Voting on previous requests. Request number 1907, the American Geophysical Union Conference. Table is open for discussion. Demetria.
I think that their topic was really interesting, and especially because they said they weren't able to find any other research on it before, so I think it would be a really great opportunity for them to go and share it with other people in the field.
Alex.
I think the fact that it will help students at Central gain funding to continue their own research, I think is a really important part of research for that.
Demetria.
I motion to allot $2,285 for the American Geophysical Union Conference.
Brandon seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Greg.
I think that does that include food? Well, it's difficult to say.
The expenses due, at least that they projected. So the other funding, I know SAS doesn't allow food, but the graduate travel funds and undergraduate travel funds can. It depends on the letter that is produced, and I haven't seen that letter yet.
So to answer the question, it's listed on there, but it's also, it could be under the other funding. I don't recall what they specifically said. I did have a point to say, if I remember correctly, they actually lowered the amount, and they were only requesting $2,185. Because their transportation was $100 instead of $200. I don't know if anyone else has that. We can still allot them the amount that you put on there, or we can make an amendment.
Can I amend my motion, or?
We have to vote on it, but yes.
Okay.
So Demetria moves to amend.
Alex, or no, Brandon second.
Brandon, do you second the amendment, Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay. So Demetria moves, Brandon seconds the amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in approval of amending the previous motion of $2,285 to $2,185. All those in favor? So you're just voting on the amendment? Okay, any opposed to voting on the amendment? Any abstaining? Okay. All right, so the amendment passed, so now we're back to the original motion of whether or not to approve, or to approve them $2,185. The discussion on the motion is still active.
Since we were talking about continuity like last week, and you said we weren't funding food, I don't think it's fair to fund these guys' food either. So I think we're gonna have to take off 900.
Well, the part that I would say, I'm in agreement with staying consistent. The challenge is when they list it on here, but it could be funded, they could be using the other funding they've received to cover the food
Oh,
costs.
okay. So it's not committed yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg?
So is it possible to say we fund the full amount with the stipulation that the food doesn't go to S&A and it goes elsewhere? Is that, I mean, that's awkward, I know. There's a better way to say that.
You can say that we approve X amount with no food reimbursement.
Is that an amendment?
We can add it on
Okay,
right now.
okay.
We'll just say that as part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of funding the American Geophysical Union Conference for $2,185?
Not to include it.
Not to include food? All those opposed? Any abstaining? The motion passes. Now let's move into supplemental funding request 1908, the Phi Alpha Theta Regional Conference. Table is open for discussion. Demetria?
I think it's really interesting to see like Central's presence at this conference in the past, especially with them having the largest group last year, and how they're looking ahead so early to start advertising to get more students involved with the conference, and especially since a student last year won best, what is it called? Like the best paper, I guess. Yeah.
Greg?
There's food on this one also. It's maybe difficult, or that's part of something else. So I think we just need to look at those numbers.
Lacey?
And just for point, Club Senate and Academic Senate do not allow food. So, it is after that.
Greg?
So if I'm reading this correctly, then, there's two different lines for food?
So I think the first line has to do with the registration, and so certain conferences, sorry.
Oh,
Do I
okay.
need to be called up?
Lacey?
Certain conferences include food with their registration.
Right, okay, I see that now.
Tanya?
I just kind of want to check my understanding of this being kind of new. They said, hey, we would like to take 30. If they end up taking fewer, it's not that if we approve all of it minus the food, which is what I'm assuming we might be going toward, and they, instead of taking 30, they take 15, then they would be reimbursed less money. It's not that the 15 will then like live like kings or anything like that. It's just, it'll still be these same things just for fewer people. So there's not really a, as far as I understand it, like a risk of approving it for 30 people if they take less. Is that?
Just as a point, it can be difficult when we look at it per person, so let's just say it's 15 or whatnot, because certain things, they'll split rooms and we'll have to like split it per person, or we'll split a cab ride or something like that. So, we could put that in there, that there's a cap, but I think just as a general statement for all the funds requests, is it does get a little gray when you think of it as a cap per student travel.
So they, sorry.
Tanya?
So they could presumably then take 15 students but still use all of that money.
Joey?
But we assume that they.
I mean, they hypothetically could. The hard part would be is that there's only certain things that are reimbursable if they
Okay.
return back in. And so what we had seen is not that case, because mostly what they're asking for is their registration,
Right.
which is gonna go up. And hotels in Pocatello, there's not, I can't imagine anything that would give them that large of a benefit over what they have in Pocatello.
Greg?
And also things like, they're using the motor pool, and so that is 4 vans, so if it's less people, it
Right.
would only be 2 vans or something. So then that would be the difference of reimbursement, right? So that would.
Lacey?
And if they come in under the budget, so if we approve, we'll just say the $7,800 and they don't meet that mark, it does come back to S&A. And I actually report on that when they've cleared up their reimbursement.
Is there any further discussion? Greg?
Does anyone have a calculator? Or do I, if I want to go ahead and I haven't made a motion to actually fund it again yet. So 7857 minus 3570.
4287.
Exactly. That's to fund this, 4287.
Okay, so Greg moves, is there a second? Tanya seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving for $4,287? Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, and the motion passes. Now let's just, table is open for discussion, supplemental funding request 1909, the Future Safety Leaders Conference. Okay,
I think in terms of like the fact that they had everything set up and were pretty much funded, and that this was more of like an emergency case, that their flights increased in cost by a couple $100, like, and they chose to come here to supplement that. That's a reasonable cost for sending these students somewhere they're going to professionally develop so well.
okay.
Move to allot $411.
Is there a second? Kane moves, Demetria seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion at hand? Joey?
The only thing I would point out is that this one does also include food, since you brought it up in the previous two reports.
Tanya?
Do those other organizations cover food? No.
Oh, they do, sorry, they do not. No. And I'm trying to, because I was under the impression that it was just for the lights.
Yeah.
We can put that similar in there, that this dollar figure is purely for lights.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the Future Safety Leadership Conference for $411? All those opposed?
Yeah, is that
Just for the flights. Yes, all those in favor, all those opposed? Any abstaining? With that, the motion passes. Now let's jump into new business, supplemental funding requests, presentations, and the first one is request 1910, the American Mock Trial Association entry fee.
Yes, I'm right.
Doesn't matter, just come out.
Down here, actually.
10 minutes to present and 10 minutes for questions.
Hi, I'm Allie, and I'm the senator for the CWU Mock Trial Club. Basically, what we do is we go to competition, like the first round of competitions in February, and we just argue out one side of like a trial against another team. And it's in Seattle in February, but we don't have the exact date yet. All we're asking for is $750 just to cover the registration fees associated. We're taking 2 teams this year. I believe 7 is going to be on one and 9 is going to be on another. They could grow a little bit more if they want to, but that's about where we're at. We also have like hotel cost and other things like that we will request through the Club Senate. And then also we each individually pay for gas and food while we're there. So all we're asking for is the fee for competition. Our advisor already paid for it so we could get the case materials early so that we could start practicing and going through the case. So it would just need to be reimbursement for him. That's it.
Any questions? Demetria?
How are the teams formed?
How do we, like our teams?
Yeah.
We just had whoever was interested joined, and since we had such a big interest this year, we made sure people were interested in actually going to competition, and then we accommodated all the people that have joined the club.
Kane?
Has the mock trial club historically gone to this, like past several years? Or?
So just last year was our first year at competition. We were just recently formed, so that was our first year of competition, and we did really well for a starting team, and we didn't advance, but there is the potential for advancement to further rounds.
Joey?
Seeing that you all have money in your club account, what do you all typically use that on throughout the year?
So for the club account, what we just recently bought was a tablecloth for our club for tabling. And then we are also working towards planning a fundraiser for the spring. We haven't done one yet, but we're planning on using those funds for that.
I just like to make myself. What will you be bringing back to Central and the rest of the student population here?
So one thing that's really nice is that it kind of puts Central's name out there. So I guess this isn't just for Central, but I think a lot of people don't think of us for law and justice and things like that. Kind of puts that program out there. But then for the students here, it gives them tons of experience. It's kind of something that you don't really get to do anywhere else, like go into a, in front of real judges and real attorneys and present sides of a case. And it is very confined to rules that are different than actual trial would be, but it gives them an experience that they wouldn't get otherwise if they want to go to law school and really boost their resume and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this. How many students are going to go?
So 7 on one team and 9 on the other is about where we're at, but then if we get more people to join, I believe we're allowed 10 per team.
Okay.
Any further questions? Awesome, thank you. Will we vote on this next week? 2 weeks. All right, so next we have supplemental funding request 1911, student success peer coaching.
Good evening.
Oh.
How is everyone?
Great.
My name is Carolyn Gerson. I'm the Director of Academic Success Initiatives in the Office of the Dean of Student Success. I'm also the advisor for Student Academic Center. So I'm here today to talk to you about a proposal. I wrote a proposal. I've been writing proposals for a number of years, but all having to do with student success. So my first couple of drafts were academic recovery proposals. For students who are on warning or probation who are struggling academically, I'd like to see institutional support for programming that helps students succeed. Things we know help students succeed are intensive advising, tutoring programs, mentoring programs. Those have not yet come to the table, but I had the opportunity this year to write a proposal that slims it down a little bit and focuses it. So what you're seeing is a proposal for an academic success coaching program using peer coaches. So what we're asking you for is to fund our coaches as a professional and academic development piece for them. So the intention is to pilot a program winter and spring quarters housed within the Learning Commons, hiring student success coaches at the rate of $14 an hour plus benefits, 6 coaches each quarter with probably paired with 10 students each. They will be trained in best practices for coaching students, which is based on student development theory and best practices for academic success strategies. The whole piece has other things we're asking for. We're asking for a big chunk of money from you, we realize. Just a penny under $25,000, so we don't have to go through another layer to go to the Board of Trustees. We are, however, requesting over $30,000 through the Provo Strategic Investment Fund for funding the coordinator for this position and the materials we'll need for developing the program, and any other expenses that you can see on here. I believe in this idea because I've always worked with students who are struggling, and what I know is one-on-one relationships are very impactful for students who are struggling. So we also know that peers have a very unique ability to have an effect on students who are struggling. What the research tells us, though, which is most interesting to you for the purpose of consideration, is that those who are hired to be peer mentors benefit academically and professionally. They learn skills you can learn pretty much no other way, okay? By working one-on-one, by helping somebody else. As you know, our motto at CWU is through teaching we learn. We know that this is true. You probably know that. If you taught somebody else something that you're struggling with, you probably know it a little bit better because you taught it. So I think most everything else is in writing, and I don't want to overwhelm you. I'd rather hear your questions. I'm sure I missed things, and Joey's going to give me fire away at me, so I'm ready. And Katie Boswell is also here. She is the director of the Learning Commons, and these positions will be working for Katie through a coordinator in that position, and they will be housed in the Learning Commons. So,
Any questions? Are there any questions? Brandon.
Might be silly, but like, what's the difference between like a success coach and a tutor?
So a tutor is helping a student on a specific discipline, a specific, say, somebody who's struggling with math, okay? So they are hired for their abilities and their successes and their experience and their gifts in that particular discipline. So a math tutor or a writing consultant would be a tutor. A peer success coach is actually trained in an array of study strategies and sort of a more holistic approach to being successful as a student. What we know about the students who end up on warning, probation, and suspension, and the students who are leaving our institution, is that many of them come in not understanding how to navigate systems. So many of them are first-generation college students. Many of them are from other underrepresented backgrounds, low income. So they have a lot of systems they have to learn to navigate that students who are not first generation, for example, don't have the same difficulties with. So much of it is navigational, but it's also about a relationship that's different than a tutor. Tutor doesn't really develop probably as broad of a relationship with someone, what they're tutoring. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hey.
So in my mind, I kind of see this on the same level as like resident assistants, or like, would you see that kind of coordination with like the other areas of campus that support students? So like with the resident assistants or with like TRIO or other academic support programs?
So residence assistants have a really different role.
Right.
But yes, there's a similarity in that they're working intensively with students, particularly students who are first-year students, okay? But they're answerable to housing, to residence life for a different reason, you know? This reason, the reason behind this, is to help students who are struggling do better academically. So it's very much academic. The focus is academic rather than, you know, having a roommate challenge. You know, roommate conflicts are the '1 conflicts that first-year college students experience. Many of you probably remember that, right? TRIO, I'm glad you brought that up. Having worked in a TRIO program, Student Support Services, as an advisor, I will say that everything valuable I learned about helping students who meet those criteria, first gen, low income, students with disabilities, is sort of a background for this proposal. Best practices say that the relationship with another person engaged in the university is probably the number one most effective thing for helping a student succeed. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I was looking more on like the RA side, like coordinating with each other, like programming with one another, or like having the opportunity to connect students with these peer success coaches and the coordinator in that aspect of just like holistically looking at student success from every angle.
Right. Well, I believe that there's going to be a relationship that develops between the coaches, just as tutors develop a relationship with each other. They're in a class together for training, to learning those skills for tutoring. We envision the same kind of skill set, and then relational support for being success coaches. Was that closer to it? Okay.
Demetria.
Within that, is there a method for how you would pair these 10 students with their coach?
So one of the things that's challenging about success coaches is how do you get students paired with other students and monitor whether or not they're meeting and what they're doing and supervising that. And if we're going to build a program that we can actually track in terms of learning outcomes and its effectiveness, it has to be a pilot program that we use a control group in that. So the idea was we house the whole program within a University 102 class, which is a 2-credit strategies for college success class. So the coordinator would be the instructor of record for that class, but the success coaches would also help teach the class, but also would have one-on-one meetings outside of that class. So 2 sections, by permission only, University 102. Does that make sense?
Well, like a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
So does that mean for like winter quarter, they'd be enrolling in that 102 class?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the students would, not the coaches. The students would be, yes.
Can you tell us a bit about how the coaches would be selected?
Yes. This is kind of the partnership piece.
So when we were initially talking about who we wanted for coaches, we know that this would be a really important role in terms of working with students who are struggling or at risk. And so we thought, let's take our model of tutoring. So our tutors all go through a CRLA certified program. That's College Reading and Learning Association. They go through different levels. Right now, we've only been offering level 1. And so we thought, okay, we'll choose from some of our best students who have already gone through that certification process, and we will allow them to get certified at another level, level 2 or level 3, so that they have that, they have their own professional development, that they can say that they advanced within these levels that are internationally recognized. And it allows us to kind of choose from the cream of the crop, so to speak. So those students that we really know are able to engage in the way that we want them to engage with students. Because it is a different skill set from tutoring. And the students that we choose need to be able to develop those long-term relationships and really develop coaching skills, which is, it's very different from the drop-in tutoring that we run like in the Math Center and the Writing Center, where a student might only see somebody, or a tutor might only see somebody, once a quarter or something like that. But we do have kind of a pool of tutors that we're currently looking at that could be really successful coaches.
We're also interested in doing more.
Yes, and that's, I think, one of the biggest things, that's their interest. That's their, for a lot of the students that we're looking at, that's kind of their career trajectory. They want to go into maybe an education program. There's some of them that are looking at going into higher education and working in student success programs.
Greg.
So, just to understand, so the 24,999 is to pay the students who you hire for this program. And I don't know if I missed it, but how many students are we hiring then? And
6 coaches.
6. So 6 that would work winter and spring, and how many hours?
It'd be 13 hours a week,
13 a week.
$14 an hour, 10 weeks for winter, 10 weeks for spring. And then it's about 5% for benefits.
And then, go ahead. So I'm trying to, it was the same question, but And then those 6 would be able to coach how many
10.
students?
They each have 10 students.
Team 10 each,
Mhm.
so 60.
Correct,
Then,
yes. So they would have an
Yes.
individual meeting, a one-on-one meeting, which comprises then 10 hours a week. And then they have a training meeting and like a prep hour and a staff meeting each week. And then there's gonna, at the beginning of the quarter, we do some mandatory training for all of our students that they'd have to participate in, so that would be included in that cost.
and the students that will be coached sign up for their suggested sign up for how do they?
So we're working on that piece, that's a very good question. We have a pretty quick turnaround time. We can identify students who were at risk coming into the university. So they're first-year students who have certain risk factors to begin with. But we want to offer this to students who land on warning.
Yeah.
So we're going to ask for the help of advisors to reach out to their students who end up on warning, who meet our criteria, to pitch the program to. So we're hoping that works. We do know that one of the things we were looking at is incentive for those students to sign up. We are going to ask for financial aid to see if they can identify funds for students to help with tuition costs, winter and spring quarter. But we have no idea if there's money out there for that.
So that is 10 minutes for question
Okay.
answer. Are there further questions? Do we want to extend?
We can make a motion
Yeah,
to
I was
extend.
gonna motion.
Okay, so Demetria motions, is there a second? Kane seconds.
We'll say for up to 10 minutes.
Okay, is there any discussion on extending the Q&A period? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? With that, the motion passes and Q&A is extended for 10 minutes. Who's next, Demetria?
Okay, so with this being a pilot program, what are some of the ways you're going to, looking for the word, evaluate whether it was successful or not?
That's a really good question too. Do you mind, Carolyn, if I jump in?
No, go ahead.
So because we are a certified program through CRLA, and we are, the Learning Commons is going for both NCLCA and NAID certification. So NCLCA is National College Learning Center Association, NAID is National Association for Developmental Education, and you can get certification for a multitude of programs outside of just developmental programs. So they actually have guidelines for the data that we have to collect and how we do our assessment over a 5-year period. So a lot of what we're collecting will be informed by those national best standards. But we will be looking at the comparison groups. We will be looking at their impact on GPA, their impact on retention. In addition to that, I think it's really important to point out that some of the things that NAID requires focus on what happens with the coaches or with the tutors. And so we actually have to collect assessment on the impact on the tutors and the coaches. So we will additionally be looking at the impact on GPA for the coaches, and we'll be collecting surveys for their own satisfaction with training, and I think some of the other questions that NAID requires are their reported improvement in affective skills, so leadership and connectedness and collaborative skills, and then metacognitive skills, so study skills and content knowledge and all those things. We'll be collecting those for both the tutors, or I say tutors because I'm so used to saying tutors, you guys, but coaches
Yeah.
and the students themselves. And we'll collect that, you know, if this is something that we're successful with and we continue with, we'll just keep collecting it as we go.
Greg?
And I think that back to where Patrick was with that, I think you mentioned that this was tied to a University 102 class, so that's the students that are part of this, or is that, did
No.
I misunderstand that?
The idea is we identify students who are at risk, who also are students who end up on warning, and we encourage them to enroll in University 102 so that we have a way to handle to control the control, so that we can assign the coaches specific students in that class, that they're showing up, we know they're showing up. Because one of the things has been my experience with mentoring programs, and this is very much like that with peer mentoring programs, one of the difficulties you will have is if you don't tie it to something that's a class, like a class, it's very difficult to track student involvement, student levels of commitment to the program. So you might be able to collect data at the end of it, but you don't know how they got there. This is a way for us to do that. We can say, well, these were the interventions that we offered through this course that was specifically designed as a peer coaching.
And is this mostly for exploratory students? I mean, is that who you mostly would see?
They're first-year students, and most of those are exploratory, yes.
Uh-huh.
But not all of them will be.
Yeah.
That's not a requirement that they be exploratory. So some students identify that they want to be a business major, they meet these other criteria, they end up on warning. So it isn't a criteria.
Demetria.
So with enrollment already being out for winter quarter, if these funds were to be passed, how would you get the word out for students to be enrolled in University 102 at this point for this program?
So advisors, we will be contacting students and doing outreach. The coordinator that would be working for Katie would be doing that. We'd all be doing outreach. What we would like is to be able to specifically target the students who need it most. We may not be able to, they may not be interested, but we will be scurrying to make sure that they're given the opportunity.
Greg and then Tanya.
And so my experience with the strategic investment request is that we don't know anything until spring or later on that. So if that piece of the funding is not there, you know, all the other parts, that, I mean, the temporary program coordinator, you already have that person? I mean, is that going to have to be a search? And
So we've been given permission to turn in that strategic initiative funding early, and we're hoping to have an answer sometime in December.
So really the logical answer to your question is, if we don't get those funds, this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So whatever request, if you decide to grant our request and the provost they decide not to pay for the rest, we can't do it because we're not going to put it on the backs of the learning commons. You know, it has to be a fully funded program, and it's a retention initiative, so there is a lot of energy right now around that because we do have a retention issue at Central right now, particularly for first-year full-time freshmen.
Tanya, did you?
That was actually my question, so thank you.
Are there any further questions? Joey?
My question on the, and maybe this is a logistics one, but looking at there is that the coaches are going to be trained in a one-credit university course. How's that going to work if they're not going to be hired until winter quarter as well?
We don't actually require the coaches to take the academic course. So it's an option for our tutors to enroll in the University 201 if they would like to receive academic credit for it. But our certification actually is outside of that course. So we actually offer the training the first Saturday of every quarter. And we like all of our students to go through that training because we focus on communication skills and how to help students with study strategies and all of the things that would really be kind of that form the foundation for the academic coaches. But the students that we would be interested in working with have already gone through that process. And so as they would on that first Saturday of the quarter take their additional level. So we have 4 hours of additional training, and then they go through training every week through the quarter as well.
But not as part of it. It would be they'd be doing training in a university class.
No.
So.
No.
Any further questions? All right, thank you. We'll go down
Thank you
to
for your
these.
time.
Thank you.
Next up is supplemental funding request, 1912 Women in Jazz Day.
Hi, my name is Joe Walround. I am the senator for the Gen Club here at Central.
My name is Hannah Reed. I am a member of GEN, and I am president of other community clubs as well.
And we are here to talk about Women in Jazz Day, an annual conference that was started last year by our Gen president, Domi Edson, and Gen member and now band director over at Mount St. High School, Hannah Mori, recent Central graduate. Basically, when you look at a typical American middle school jazz ensemble, you will see about half the members are women. And by the time we get to high school, that number is cut in half. By college, it's cut in half again. And by the time we get to the professional level, where you look at a professional level jazz band, less than 1% of jazz musicians across the country are women. Here at Central, typical collegiate ensembles about 10%. Here at Central, we're slightly above average with 15% and now 17% this year.
So there's been a lot of research into why there are so few women in jazz ensembles, particularly instrumental ensembles. Jazz has historically been a man's world as is music in general. You probably know musicians Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, Tom Basie, but you may not know Mary Armstrong or Billie Holiday. And it's something that it's difficult for women, especially young women, to get into because they may see a lack of role models. Auditions are also an issue because jazz tends to have a lack of blind auditions. And if you're networking, you might just know, if there's a band who is
culturally in the jazz world, you typically don't have the same institutional processes that you'd see with like a symphony orchestra. Symphony orchestras are run very much like a professional business in that they have professional outreach and blind auditions. And they used to not have blind auditions, and we saw a similar problem where more than 90% of musicians in symphony orchestras were men. Once they introduced blind auditions, we saw a much more progress towards gender parity, with closer to 50% of symphony orchestra musicians being women. So basically, the point of this is to say that there's a lot of ingrained issues that may not have been put in place specifically to work against women, although there were many things put in place specifically work against women, especially back in the 1930s. But they've just kind of stuck around, and it's created a lot of barriers for women trying to be professional jazz musicians or even jazz educators.
And the other issue is the heart of jazz is improvisation, which, if you don't know, is it's basically composing music on the spot while playing or singing, which is it's a different style of music. It's very difficult to learn, and the starting process is just there's a lot of bad sounds because it's how you learn. You have to start bad before you improve. And there's an interesting survey that was done with job applications. Men will typically apply for something if they feel 60% prepared for it. Women typically will apply if they are 100% prepared. So applying that to improvisation, if you don't feel 100% prepared, and it's really hard to do that, you just won't do it, which if you don't do it, you don't get better.
Another issue is if you're the only woman in a jazz band and you mess up, you all of a sudden have this pressure put on you that you represent all women, and that's not good. So, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. We need this day because there's just a lack of representation in jazz, or female representation in jazz, especially instrumentally. If you see these just very basic little images, if you look at, it says female jazz silhouette, and it's all vocalists. In the vocal world, it's a lot easier to have balance because you need to have that the higher female register. But if you look at, it says female jazz instrumentalist silhouette, it's all male silhouettes. And this was an email talking about the Seattle Jazz Day, Girls Jazz Day, I believe. And there was somebody who responded, is there a guys' jazz day, or a guys' day of jazz coming soon? And the fact that that comment exists shows why we need a woman in Jazz Day.
So what we're trying to put together, what we put together last year, and what we are hoping to continue this year, is a day in April 12th, Saturday, set aside exclusively to celebrate women in jazz. And it will feature master classes, which is basically very instrument-specific instruction. Nothing gender-specific here, just here's how to play saxophone better, here's how to play trumpet better. But then it will break into clinics that are clinics and a panel discussion that are typically more focused towards women in jazz issues, like for educators, how to run your band programs so that female students feel more welcome. There are a lot of especially male educators who, as well-intentioned as they are, might just be completely blind to certain issues they might face. And we'll also include all-female jam sessions where women can perform together. These are all central students here performing with professional clinicians, and then they can talk about how to feel comfortable performing when you have these sorts of pressures on you. And then we'll cap off the day with a faculty performance, which is really important because it's very helpful for female students. We reach out to middle school, high school, and colleges to see women on stage doing what they want to do. Can you read? Oh, yeah.
So this can benefit many people, or young female musicians who are invited, both middle school and high school. There are future present educators. Last year I attended, and I see myself more as an educator than I'm not a jazz musician, first of all. And it was really helpful to learn techniques to really foster jazz education, especially for women. Current CWU students and future CWU students, I'm sorry. And this is free for all who would like to attend. Last year we had over 100 participants, and it was really awesome. And it just it advertises Central, and it shows that we have a music program and a campus that is accepting to all students, and we want to make it a more equal playground for everyone.
How are we doing on time? 3 minutes? Great. Another thing worth noting, since we're on the topic of representing Central, our Gen Club is the model chapter for the country. Last year, our members of our Gen board were asked to present a panel at the national conference on how to effectively run a collegiate Gen chapter, including how to make non-jazz musicians feel welcome at jam sessions, how to recruit, how to bring in clinicians, all these sorts of things. And interestingly enough, our Gen Club runs this event, and it is the only event of its kind at the collegiate level west of the Rockies. So we have a national stage here, in a way, and we are running the only event of its kind at the collegiate level, which I think makes sense. And also, an interesting note about the 100 participants. If I remember correctly, last year the outreach, because things were very up in the air until about mid-February, the outreach was kind of last minute. This year we have been advertising this event since July. So we're expecting, I think, a much bigger uptake. I know I'm taking a poster back home to my old high school. We have about 20 students that, when we all go home for winter break, we're taking back posters to talk to our whole band directors and advocate for this event. Just an idea of who we're bringing out. Monica Herzig is a pianist. She teaches in Massachusetts, and she also does a lot of work with the Smithsonian Institute with preserving jazz history and helping fund grants for various jazz education outreach events in the Northeast area. Marina Christopher is a Central Washington University alumni, also an alumni of my old high school. Karina Colas is a drummer originally from Mexico, and Jay Luis is a trumpet player originally from Australia. So we do have people coming in from all over the world, actually. actually, John A. Kendrick is a professor at Cornish College of the Arts over in Seattle, in the local Seattle musician. Just an idea, these are really extremely high caliber musicians that we're bringing up. And interestingly enough, I've only heard of maybe 3 of them. And I think that still speaks to the kind of issues we're trying to solve here. There's a budget. Any questions?
Greg?
So last year was over 100 participants, and you listed, school children, and there was kind of a variety. How many of those were Central students?
So maybe about a third.
About a third. Okay. So is that mostly the jazz club? Is it?
There was a variety. A lot of people, members of the jazz area, came out, and then Hannah, for example, is tuba performance and music education.
Not performance, but I'm just
Music
an
education,
major.
and she studies tuba and plays in the symphony orchestra. We have many other people similar to that. So it goes beyond just the jazz area.
But mostly about 30-some music students.
Yeah, 30 or a third of the students are separate from Central. That came to me.
And that assisted, for Central students, it helped in their own professional development, both as musicians and educators. So it is very helpful for Central students who choose to attend.
One other thing, speaking of professional development, we are working on getting this event certified with the Washington Music Educators Association as a clock and nose event. So current educators can come out and receive professional development hours to come to the event, because it's the only one of its kind on this half of the country.
So you mentioned about like you're advertising with posters and stuff. How else are you guys advertising the event?
We have reached out through Seattle Jazz Ed, which is a jazz education outreach over in Seattle. And then the primary advertising is through the network of band directors that Central has. We are probably the premier music education program in the Pacific Northwest, and so we have a considerable reach as far as being able to get the word out to band programs all over Washington.
Demetria?
Since this event happened last year, what's one piece of feedback you received and then are implementing this year, if there's any?
We're trying to bring out just a wider variety of clinicians, more women of color, and more people from not just Seattle. And then a longer panel discussion, because there were a lot of really, really good topics that we got into in that discussion, and just leaving more time for that. I think that was probably the most productive part of the event.
Greg?
Based, last year's event, then what were the benefits to the community of Central then, of all the other students?
Do you want? I know you have an experience. You wanted to talk about how it benefited people.
Well, like I said, I don't see myself as a jazz musician. I played jazz in high school, but coming to Central, I didn't feel like I was able to continue with jazz. I'm a tuba player, so I don't play, my main instrument is not a standard jazz instrument. I wish I had something like this coming to Central and even before, because I would have felt more motivated to try and continue with jazz. I auditioned for the jazz programs, jazz bands and jazz combos my first quarter, and it didn't go well, and I just felt so hopeless in jazz, and I never wanted to. I thought I was just going to give up and never do jazz ever again. After doing Women in Jazz Day, I was a part of Jazz Band 4 on trombone, bass trombone, spring quarter, and I also, right now, I'm doing Vocal Jazz 3 in order to try and understand the complexities behind jazz and to make myself a better educator so that students don't, like female students don't have to go through that kind of experience. They feel confident and motivated and really want to succeed in jazz and feel that they can do so.
Part of why that's important is because our music program here is primarily a music education program, and more than 80% of band programs in Washington have a jazz program attached to it. So if a considerable number of our graduates are women and they don't feel like they have a way to access jazz, they're going to come into their first jobs and be very unprepared for that part of their work.
Okay.
You all had mentioned something about potentially getting this recognized by an organization.
Yeah.
What does that, would that in the future potentially provide any funding for this, aside from having to come from S&A, or did they just advertise it for you?
I'm not sure how that works. The main sort of recognition we're hoping for is have it certified so that current educators, people who are working in the schools now, can come here and get professional development hours, and that's just as kind of an enticement for people to take one of their precious Saturdays off and come out here to do professional development.
Demetria.
In the proposal, it says that you are going to be selling pizzas for fundraising. Has that already happened, or is that a future?
We sell pizza every Tuesday.
Oh.
And as a fundraiser, so that we have money set aside. And part of that fundraising is so, you know, with this sort of event, there are a million details up in the air. And if a flight in gets delayed and now usually we send students to CTAC to pick up the clinicians because it's cheaper that way. But if a flight gets delayed and now a student can't get to the airport and we have to put them on a shuttle, we can just pay for it, you don't have to go make a funding request. Little things like that helps to have money set aside. Take care of those things.
Are there any further questions? We can vote on this in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you very much.
Right, next is supplemental funding request 1913, Lion Rock Visiting Writers Guest Speaker.
I have the mouse.
Oh, it's called LRBWS. Minus the color.
So I'm Lisa Norris, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Lion Rock Visiting Writers Series. I've talked to you all before about Monastash Student Literary Magazine, so it's nice to be back and to see you again, and thanks for your time. So first I have to figure out how to go back. Okay, so benefits of the Lion Rock series. We bring nationally recognized writers to campus. The events are free and open to all students and the community as well. We try to call attention to diversity by bringing speakers from underrepresented groups. We stream events to online students, and we now have a completely online BA in English, so all those students are getting to see the writers as well. It helps Central to establish a reputation with other schools in the state, highlights the writing of CWU faculty and alum. This year we've had 2 showcases where faculty and alum read or will read together, and promotes interdisciplinarity and collaboration. We've often, you'll see in a minute, we've partnered with other organizations on campus to bring writers. It does provide material to meet course requirements in some English classes, and last time I was at a Lion Rock event. I asked people around me where they come from, and there were several students from University 101 as well. So it's drawing on those folks. And okay. So our quick commercial, we've hosted a number of award-winning writers. I could go through all their awards, but it would take a long time. And you may recognize some of the names in this list. Past readers have included a National Book Award winner and veteran, Vietnam veteran Tim O'Brien, for example. And a few winners, a couple winners of the MacArthur Genius Award. Anthony Doerr, some of you may have read All the Light I Cannot See, which was definitely a notable book, and so on. So lots of really exciting writers, as well as some local and regional writers and faculty and alum. So this year, our lineup includes, in the fall, we had a showcase with faculty and alum, and we had a poet. In the winter, we've got another faculty and alum event, a fiction writer, Aaron Stallcup. In the spring, we have a poet, Joss Charles. We had hoped to have two trans writers and have a trans day, but we were only able to get one. And so Joss Charles will be that one. Fiction writer Christiana Kalahawela is Hawaiian, and so she's, again, representing a group that's underrepresented. And the fiction writer Erica Sanchez is quite a well-known, nationally recognized Latina writer. So this year we're collaborating with Humanities Washington. We did get a grant to contribute, which contributed toward Erica Sanchez. So we wouldn't have been able to bring her without that extra $1,000 from the Humanities Washington. And of course, every event, the Wildcat Shop sells books at every event. The College of Arts and Humanities always gives us, so far, knock on wood, has given us some money every year. The Department of English used to give us most of our money, but now that money is going elsewhere under RCM. The Veterans Center has partnered with us this year because we are bringing a veteran, an alumni who was a Gulf War veteran. Some of the events we've had are in the Museum of Culture and Environment, so they also partner with us. The Brooks Library is partnering with us this year on all our events. And local libraries this year are using a book called To Live, which is by a Chinese writer but translated by an American. And that will be the One Book, One County pick this year. So they also collaborate with us. And in the past years, we've also collaborated with ABS, CLCE. Do you guys know these initials, or do I need to spell them out? I don't know. CBSJ. It's okay. CCLAS. You know, I feel like their grant helped us bring Ruth Ozeki one year. She's an Asian American writer, and so on. Center for the Social Justice and Human, SJHR, I forgot what that all stands for, but they also have given us funding and in the past. But this is just this year's collaborations. So what we would like to do is to be able to issue invitations this year for next fall. And we would like to have an event under the heading, What It Is to Know Each Other, Home and Away, that brings two immigrant writers who will appeal to Latinx populations. And so that would be a single event in the fall with two writers in conversation with each other and in the audience, probably in a big venue like the Cirque Theater, which holds about 300 people. So that would be nifty. We could connect it to curriculum in various classes across campus and hopefully get some visibility. So I am budget challenged. I should say I spent a lot of time on these tables. You wouldn't believe how hard this is for me. So I just want to pause and admire my own work because I'm an English professor and not a math person. But these are the overall expenses of the writers we have invited or hope to invite. And I just broke it down for you so you could see where we get those figures. So you'll notice some of them don't have a lodging cost. That's because they happen to know one of the writers on the faculty and are willing to stay with that faculty member. And so, you know, we've managed a little bit of savings there. BAR is the translator of To Live, and an NEA grant is bringing that translator. But Lion Rock has agreed to partner and provide some publicity and so on. And so, you know, for all of these writers, these are the kinds of things we have to pay for. Then, for the 2 writers we wish to invite, the extra $3,000. So, our revenue this year is $92.50 from these sources. You'll notice the English department is not one of them. And then the amount of our request to cover our shortfall is $3,000. So this is kind of a typical audience at a Lion Rock event. And again, it's a mix of, this was held in the Museum of Culture and Environment. We had 2 events in the fall, and they were both standing room only. So in the winter, we're going to move to the Brooks Commons, where we'll have a little bit more space. And then if the events can be bigger, like Erica Sanchez we think will be bigger, then it'll be in the Cirque Theater. So just to emphasize again the benefits of the series. Just one more click. I'll just leave you thinking about the second slide. Yeah. Benefits. So questions?
Greg?
So, I mean, this has been going on many years, and so either projection or, you know, annually, approximately how many of CW community members do you think are attending or, you know, benefiting directly from
Well,
this?
we have, so 2 events in the fall, 2 events in the winter, 3 events in the spring every year so far. So 7 events. And if the museum holds, the museum standing room only, depending on how many chairs we put out, that's 50 to 70 per smaller event. And then we usually have at least 1 event in the Cirque Theater that can hold up to 300, and so it'll be 2 to 300. So each, so again, I'm math challenged. But you guys can help me out, right? So this quarter alone, I would say, I'm going to guess 140 people, because the museum was packed and had standing room only for 2 events. And I'm going to guess that winter quarter will be the same. So look, I can do it. It's 280, 145. And then in the spring, my guess is that Sanchez, let's say we get up 300 people there. So that's 540 plus another 100, what did I say? So anyway, 600-ish, 600 to 700 people. Thank you for that question. I'm very impressed that I did the math.
Demetria?
How did you decide on the theme for next fall?
Well, I could have told you our whole year's idea, but we are hoping to come back and ask you for base funding next year, and then I'll be giving you more of the thing. But we actually, our overall theme of what it is to know each other came somewhat out of the split between, you know, our political split in the country. So we're trying to figure out how can we get people in conversation with each other and around some of the issues that are dividing the country. And so immigration is obviously a big divider. And we would love for people to just have empathy for each other and connect with each other around these issues, which is what literature can do, what literature does best, I think. And so our other 2 issues, one of them is sustainability. And so we're hoping to bring some writers who will speak to that issue. And I think the winter one we were still pondering. But the overall theme for the year is what it is to know each other, trying to bring people together.
Any further questions? All right, we'll be voting on this in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time. Can I just pull this out without
Yeah.
hurting anything?
Really, yeah, that's good.
Thanks again.
All right. So, other business communications received. I have not received any. So the second call for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
I didn't find the minutes for any more than the first two meetings. I wanted to know if those were going to be online.
Yeah, they should be online.
They need to be approved first, so.
So for the third meeting and the fourth meeting.
Yeah, it was sound.
So we just approved November 7th. I think October 31st may not have been posted yet. But
Any other public comment? All right, seeing none. Is there a motion on the table for adjournment? Kane? Is there a second? Demetria seconds. Any discussion on adjournment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining? And with that, the motion passes and we are adjourned at 6:46. See you all in 2 weeks.
Chocolate bookstore downstairs.
Oh, it's probably still open, isn't it?
I was closing yesterday.
That could be what, yeah.
Chocolate with all those red onions.
Again, don't come next week. I mean, unless you want to, but I won't be here. Yeah.